Welcome to episode 4 of Sharing Developer Stories hosted by Tech Valley. Today's guest is Valerie Osei, a full-time front-end engineer and a YouTube content creator called ValsCodeBlock. Hey everyone, welcome to the Sharing Developer Stories hosted by Tech Rally. I got a very awesome guest who I met recently a few weeks ago, and I knew I had to talk to her and have her on my series. Valerie Osei, a front-end engineer working full-time at Spin Master, and also has a up-and-coming YouTube channel called ValsCodeBlock. Hey Valerie, how are you?
I'm good, Alex, and I'm so excited to be here and to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, I met you about a few weeks ago. I didn't even know you existed. You probably didn't know I
Yeah,
existed,
I
but
know.
but we went into the same clubhouse room talking about so many variables about how to break into tech, and I just thought, wow. First of all, you're a great speaker, so I was like,
Thank
man, I
you.
need to have her on. And when I made that shoot your shot moment of asking people if they want to interview, you were flashing your microphone. So definitely so happy to connect. But
Yes,
yeah. In terms of, yeah, like, can you just give us a quick intro about yourself?
absolutely. So as you mentioned, I work as a front-end developer, and I'm based in Toronto. I got into tech out of sort of more of a customer service, social sciences background, I guess. So definitely not technical at all, but tech always interested me, and I knew over time that it was something I wanted to break into, but I wasn't sure how for a while. And I feel like I'm that type of person who's gone on the journey of trying different things to see what I like. And then eventually I thought, after doing some research into the industry, I thought this is something I can do. I just need to find a way to orient myself so that I can make that shift and make that transition. So I'm really happy with the work that I do, and I'm also excited to get to keep learning and to be meeting different people, such as yourself. And Clubhouse has been a huge platform for that. So super excited, and I think tech just affords people the opportunity to try all sorts of things. So it's definitely up my alley.
Yeah, that's true. Can you just share a little bit more about your software developer journey? Because I know everyone has very rich past of what they used to do, and even when I went to coding boot camp, I met artists and musicians and all that. So I'm very curious of what your past history, job history was like.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so I went to the University of Toronto where I studied French and political science as a double major. And then when I got out of school, I didn't really have a specific direction with what I wanted to do professionally. But because I also speak French, I was given a lot of opportunities to work customer service administrative jobs. And I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to start. So I ended up working at a few different companies, did some work at a law firm for a bit, and then I ended up working for Honda Financial Services for a couple of years. So most of my background was customer service and administrative work. But I realized after maybe about 3 years in the workforce, I was really bored and I needed a change. And I started looking at things that I could do that were outside of what I was doing at the time. And that's kind of when coding kind of fell into my lap. But for the most part, my background prior to that was very office type of job, 9 to 5, customer service, call center type of work.
Yeah, and maybe you're kind of like downplaying. I just Googled it and coding came to me. Like, what was the motivation behind just discovering coding? I'm always curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, okay, so one night I had a long day at work. I came home and I saw an email come across my inbox for Udemy courses. They were doing a sale. So I clicked on it. I'm like, what is this Udemy thing? So I clicked on it. I went to the site. I saw that they had all these courses. I'm like, oh, and I think it was at that time, I'm sure like Udemy every once in a while will do like courses for $15 or something. And I think it was around Black Friday. So I went on and I'm like, you're telling me I can learn HTML and CSS for $15? Sold. So I purchased a course. I was on it for like the whole night, that first night. And then for subsequent nights after that, probably for about 2 weeks, I just dived myself into, I even forget the instructor's name, but it was a very interesting course. And that's when I was like, I really like this. This is so cool. So that kind of was what started the whole thing for me is that first Udemy course that I started going on YouTube and I found all these other YouTubers and yeah, the rest is history, I guess.
Cool. And then so you learned HTML, CSS on Udemy, and did you ever
hmm
transition into learning a language like JavaScript or anything like that, or what was that period like?
Yeah, so I avoided JavaScript for a while. It looked very intimidating at first, I'll confess. So I spent a lot of time doing HTML and CSS, just styling basic things, building like a navigation menu, doing just very basic website projects for myself. And then I realized after doing more research that if I wanted to take web development seriously, I was going to have to learn JavaScript at some point. So I believe it was whose course was I think it was Brad Traversy that I came across first. He has like some crash courses that he does. And so I started with him. I was watching his videos. I did a few of his projects and I was like, okay, I think I can do this. So that's when JavaScript kind of got added onto the pile. And then I would say from there is when I started thinking about what I could do to enhance my learning so I could actually become a software developer.
Right. So did you feel that even though you were taking these Udemy courses and learning JavaScript through various different platforms like YouTube and things like that,
Mhm.
you still may quote unquote didn't feel ready to be a software engineer. So you kind of started exploring different options essentially?
Yeah, I started to see, what can I do? Like, I started researching front end, back end, full stack, and I was thinking like, if I'm going to be a professional developer, what are the skill sets I'm going to have and hone in on? And like I continued watching the tutorials and doing the projects, but I also started reading blogs on Medium of people who were doing the work. And I was like, okay. And I had to go through like a really long period of reflecting on, is this a good idea? Am I totally like off the mark here? Am I crazy? Right. And so it took me a while. Like I was having fun doing it, but I'm like, it's not enough to just have fun doing it. Like I also have to add an element of seriousness to it. So that took me probably about maybe 2 years of me really going over it in my head. Like, can I do this for work? So
Right.
it was a long process.
So, definitely, I mean, but at the same time, it's good to make sure you know what you want to do. So, if it's 3 months, 6 months, 2 years,
Yeah.
you kind of got to make that you have your own path to software development journey. But I'm curious. So, it took you around 2 years of Udemy, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But what was that point where you felt like you needed to kind of look for different resources outside of just like an online learning platform?
hmm Um, I would say it was probably so when I started fiddling around with coding, we're probably talking end of 2016. And then beginning of 2017 is probably when I started thinking like, okay, I need to find a way to level up. And because I was already working full time, I was at a standstill because I was like, I didn't feel like I could exclusively do YouTube courses for a couple hours a night after work.
Hmm.
Um, so I started doing some exploration, and then I came across some boot camps that were being offered in Toronto. One of those was General Assembly. At the time, they were called Bitmaker General Assembly, and they offered like workshops they would do in the evenings. So I remember after work one night, I actually took the subway to go downtown to participate in one of the workshops just to see what it was like and to get more information. And that's when I realized like I need to find a way to get myself into this boot camp because this is really good, what's going to accelerate my journey. So that's kind of when I started thinking about it.
So when you made that decision, or not decision, or you thought about, I need to get into this to accelerate my learning, did you have that intention of, oh, I want to make this my career?
Yes, yeah,
Got
because
it.
when they had the workshop, they're like, this was another professional developer talking about what General Assembly has to offer. He was an instructor at General Assembly at the time. And I started realizing, like, wow, like this person does this job professionally and is teaching us just a very small snippet of what I could do if I also do it professionally. So that's when the reflection started happening. I was like, I think I can make the switch now. It seems more possible for me.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
And do you think that if you didn't have that 2 years of internalizing and learning HTML and CSS and JavaScript, you could have made that decision? Or is it because of that kind of accumulation of just you pondering and pondering and you're like, I got to make this decision, or what am I doing right now? Like, was it that kind of feeling?
It was that kind of feeling because it had to build up, right? I think
Right.
for me, what made it more enticing was the build up. I kept getting more and more excited. I was like, oh, I'm learning this. and I'm learning this and I'm learning this. And then the boot camp idea started to come to mind. And I'm like, okay. And I was so fidgety. I was like, I need to figure out a way to like make the official switch because I am too full of energy right now. I'm so excited. And
Right.
definitely the build up helped.
Right. It's like one of
Yeah.
those movie trailers that come out way too early before the actual
Yeah.
movie
And then the
comes out.
anticipation just builds.
So you decided to quit your job and
Hmm.
well, I assume you decided to quit your job, right? To
Yes.
pursue a full-time. Yeah. Was that a pretty hard decision to make?
Yeah, it was because I had people around me at the time who were questioning my decision because I had a pretty comfortable job. Like, it wasn't a super high paying job, but it was enough for me to get by and be comfortable. And it was a good company I was working for. I was working for Honda, so um, it was hard because to explain to people why I was doing it, I think made me second guess myself. I was like, am I sure I want to quit a whole job just to do a 3 month boot camp? What if I don't get a job right away? Like all these things kept kind of running through my mind. But the resolve came when I was like, it's either I don't do anything about this and just stay at the job that I don't like, or I take a risk, I take the leap, and I see what comes of it. I was really determined. So I had a way of knowing that I was going to get to where I want to go.
Right. And we didn't even talk about this before we started recording, but I feel like our path is very similar where I really didn't like my job either and I was working there
Hmm.
for about 3 years and you know, in some ways coding boot camps, they're not necessarily well known or it's not everyone really knows what do you actually do when you go to a coding boot camp and
Yeah.
I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people that have opinions who don't really have the full picture of what it's supposed to actually do for that specific individual. So I'm really glad that you did make that decision to
Yeah.
obviously hindsight is 2020, and the fact that you have a full time job is a good reflection of that you did make a good decision. But
Hmm.
yeah, like tell me more about the coding boot camp. How long was it?
Yeah, so it was 3 months. I did it from July 2018 to it technically ended towards the end of September, but then we also had like some networking events and final project presentations in October. So it was from July to October, I would say. And the experience was very eye opening. I remember the first day, I pretty much quit my job. Like my last day at my job was on the Friday. And then the Monday after that was when I started my boot camp. So it was all very close to session. And when I arrived on the first day, to see the room filled with all other people who made a similar decision as me was a huge sigh of relief. So I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I'm excited. So let me just do it. And then from there, I made some pretty good connections with the instructors, and I do still keep in touch with a couple of people to this day with whom I did the boot camp. And it was such a great experience. Learning wise, I learned a lot in that short period. And it gave me confidence to know that like it's possible to do it. You just have to really invest in yourself.
Yeah, that's totally true. And yeah, I think one of the things that I realized too when I went to my coding boot camp was that a lot of them had a very similar story about not
Mhm.
being really happy at their last job and then trying to find the motivation to start this new career. What was the tech stack like?
Yeah, so the tech stack at the time was Ruby on Rails primarily, and then we did I think like a week of JavaScript. Before we dove into Ruby and Ruby on Rails, we did some HTML and CSS just to give us that orientation of like front end and understanding how the web works. Um, and yeah, pretty much just understanding the request response cycle. So I would say like maybe 80% of the boot camp was Ruby and Ruby on Rails and just understanding programming using Ruby.
Right. And can you describe what a typical day was like for you, and
Mhm.
how did you manage your weeks? Because for me personally, I made a video about this about how when I did a coding boot camp, I literally said no to everything. When people asked me to hang out, people asked me to go to these events because I was so focused on coding boot camp. I'm wondering if your experience was similar, where you were just like all in on this and nothing else.
You did better than me in terms of the focus. Okay, this was probably a mistake, but my mentality going in, because I was doing it for the summer, I was like, the summer's gonna be so lit. I'm so ready. I was so excited. I was like, I'm gonna spend my whole summer downtown, day in, day out. So, okay, on a day to day, it was boot camp started at 10. So typically I would get to the site for about 9:30. I'd chit chat with some of the people who were early birds like me. We'd have some coffee, just chill. And then the instructor would come in usually around 10 to 10. And from 10 to 12, we'd be in instruction mode. So it was kind of like lecture style. And we'd be sitting there. We'd have the opportunity to ask questions, take notes, and follow along if we wanted to. Then at 12, we would break for lunch for about an hour. And then from like 1 probably till about 5, we were in strict like homework zone. And typically, depending on the instructor, we'd also have whiteboard sessions where they would walk us through whiteboard problems for code interviews. And then sometimes the time between 1 and 5 was also spent with our career coach. She'd schedule time to talk to us one on one to talk about what our plans were, our goals. So a typical day was like from 10 to 6 of learning, homework, and group work periods, having our sessions with the career coach, and then also asking questions to our instructor. When it came down to like hanging out, some of the people in like my cohort and then also the neighboring cohorts, because usually they'd have like 2 or 3 cohorts running at the same time. They'd have like free time after from like 6:30 to like 8, where we'd have drinks, and especially on Fridays we'd have drinks and snacks, and people would just like chat and stuff. So I definitely stuck around for those. Probably not the best idea because I should have been studying, but knowing me, I love that kind of social aspect. Being downtown, they also had the film festival around that time, so I hung around for that. And I would just like go to parks. Like I was not the best with keeping a consistent work schedule.
I mean,
But
maybe the two
yeah.
years of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript helped a bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely gave me that push. Like I was somewhat ahead in terms of some of the concepts we were learning, because I had taught myself a few things.
Right.
But I did take for granted that I needed time to actually work through some of the stuff we were doing, because the Ruby stuff I had no experience in.
Mhm.
But I really enjoyed just being downtown during the summertime. It was so tempting. So a lot of the times I was spending extra time where I should have been studying.
Right. But I mean,
Yeah.
that's not as bad as you make it, because you were hanging out with your classmates. I'm sure you're still
Yeah.
talking about your experiences and just saying, "Oh my gosh, that lab was hard." I meant
Yeah.
from a perspective of just saying no to other people outside of my classes.
No, for sure.
But yeah, I totally get it. But what were some highlights and lowlights of a coding bootcamp?
Highlights were definitely the social aspect of being able to network with people who are in the same position as you. Um, and also being in an environment where I felt supported, because I think before, like approaching the boot camp, I felt like I was alone. I was like, oh, I don't know if I made the best decision. I'm quitting my job. What am I going to do after? So that was definitely the highlight. I loved the community that I had. Low light though was falling behind on homework. Full disclosure, I fell quite a bit behind, and I had to do some catching up towards the middle of the boot camp. And I would say low light as well was post boot camp, when I didn't get employed right away. I had this vision in my head of how things were going to work, and then when that didn't end up coming to pass, I started getting really anxious and really stressed out.
Yeah, so that was gonna be my follow-up question was how long did it take after graduating to find a job?
Yeah, so okay, so I did some freelancing on and off post grad. Um, to get an official position in the industry, it took me 2 years from graduation. When I tell people that, they get very like scared. I know it's not everybody's story. I think for me, I focused on doing some self teaching after the boot camp, because I kind of had an idea of where I want to break in, and that's kind of what I decided to take on. And it took me the 2 years, because I spent those 2 years really honing in on skills that the boot camp didn't afford us the time to work on.
Right, right. And I know that you mentioned that you were talking to your career service
Hmm.
representative on somewhat of a frequent basis. Did you kind of reflect that kind of maybe I'm trying to understand. Were you trying to look for a specific tech stack, or were you trying to look for a specific company and that's why it took so long, or was it something of a mix of both? Maybe you could shed some light on that part.
Absolutely. I guess let me think back. So when I finished the boot camp, at that point, I was looking for Ruby on Rails jobs, because that's what I learned, right? And I thought, okay, this is easy. I know Ruby on Rails. Let's go look for Rails positions. Little did I
Makes sense.
realize, and I don't know if it's still the case, but little did I realize Rails positions are typically intermediate and above. I don't see a lot of junior Rails positions. Maybe things have changed, but at the time I was looking for a job, um, I had some interviews for Rails jobs, but they're looking at me like, okay, you just graduated your bootcamp like 5 seconds ago. I don't know if I want to take a chance on you. We move really fast. We don't have time to hold your hand and teach you. So as much as we like your enthusiasm and your energy, we just don't have the time and the resources to bring on like a junior for this position. So I had the door closed quite a few times. And that's when I realized, okay, maybe Rails is not where I want to start. As beginner friendly as the Ruby language is, I feel like for junior positions, for someone who's just starting out, you may want to go into a stack that's more in demand or more popular. So that's when JavaScript and React came to mind.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
I actually, when I went to coding bootcamp school, it was primarily Ruby and Ruby on Rails, but that was
Oh.
back in 2015. But I mean, in tech, the landscape could just change in
Oh
like
man, it
every
fluctuates
two
like
or
crazy.
3 years.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I do mostly front end development, although I learned
Yeah.
all like Ruby and Ruby on Rails full
Yeah.
stack. So
So we're very similar then.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And so how did 2 years is a long time, but at the same time, it probably gave you a lot of time to think about what do I need to learn, and how did you
Yes.
identify that? Were you just looking at job listings and seeing what people were looking for and things like that?
Yeah. So I went onto LinkedIn primarily and I just searched junior web developer and anything around that, right? And then I started seeing postings. I read them line by line by line. And the most frequently occurring that I was seeing was Python and React. Oh, and maybe some Angular, but mostly React. Um, and that's when I was like, okay, well, let me go for React because I kind of already know JavaScript. I went to React. I left React because I thought it was too hard. And I went to Angular. Then I came back to React because I'm like, it's not that bad after all. So yeah, it was mostly based off of job postings. I just searched for what kept coming up in the Toronto area. And that's when I realized, okay, React seems like it's going to be around for a while. Let me take my time and really understand it, learn it. And I think I'll have a better chance at breaking in at a React angle rather than Rails or something else.
And how did you learn React, quote unquote? Were you taking the online courses and things like that at that point?
Yeah, yeah. So I did. There was a Udemy. I forget the name of it, but it is a React course. I did one of those, and I did a lot of Brad Traversy projects. And there's other ones too, like Web Dev Simplified. There's a bunch of YouTubers that I follow, and I was just bouncing between all their courses. Coding with Mosh is another one. So I spent a lot of time on YouTube, endless hours, just understanding props and state and just how components work. And then I was doing a lot of reading on Medium as well, people who had little articles talking about certain concepts like hooks and all that stuff. And after my job, like, because I ended up getting another full-time job, and then after work I would spend maybe 2 to 3 hours a night pouring myself into it because I'm like, I am going to become a React developer. I don't care. This is what it's going to be. So that's kind of what how it went.
Right. And I remember you describing your boot camp as like the social experience where you got to
Mhm.
interact with your classmates and learn together. Not trying to throw the boot camp under the bus, but
Yeah.
after you graduated, I assumed it was probably more of like a solo path of figuring things out. How was that for you? Because I can't imagine, just
Yeah.
some days you just might be like, oh, I don't want to do this. And some days you're like, I'm motivated, let's go. Like,
Yeah,
how did you
there
push
were
yourself?
many yeah, there were many days like that. Definitely the stuff that people don't talk about. I remember feeling very down for many, many times in rotation. I would have these upswings and these downswings. And when I mean, I had stopped applying for jobs for a while because I thought, let me just take a breath. Let me step back. Going back into the job application process and still getting rejected was hard because I kept getting the whole you don't have enough experience, and coding interviews are very intimidating, so I failed a bunch of those. And but one thing that did help was a couple of my boot camp classmates. We actually kept in touch for a while. Particularly one of them, I still talk to her, and we would do little meetups. We would just be like, okay, let's go and grab food. Let's go into the library and we'll show each other what the other's working on. So that kept me motivated, I would say. And if not for that, definitely would have been a super lonely process for me.
Right, and I think people underestimate the social aspect of becoming a
Yeah.
software developer because
Yeah.
yeah, I think they have this perception that we just all we do is look at a screen and not talk to anybody. So, but definitely having that
Yeah.
buddy or someone that's kind of going through what you're going through and just kind of pushing each other. And I'm sure she was, I assume that she was also looking for a job around the same time as well. So you guys kind of
Exactly.
push each other. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Going back to just like how we first met, which was that clubhouse room about people trying to break into tech without a technical background. I heard your thoughts on the clubhouse room, but I would love to for the audience to hear about your thoughts as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that clubhouse room, we talk a lot about breaking into tech from non conventional backgrounds. So, we have all sorts of people: writers, artists, mechanical engineers, people in construction. And basically, it's a shared platform where people can come in, talk about their experiences, and also ask questions about how can I, working at X company, break into a tech company from this non conventional background. I have zero experience. I don't even know exactly what I want to do. And so it's people sharing where they're at in their journey, whether they've not started or whether they're in the middle and they're frustrated and they're looking for guidance. I came across the room randomly on my own search on Clubhouse, and that's where I met Alex, who is the creator of that room. And I've had a lot of fun helping him moderate because it's just been great to hear people's stories, but also to point people in a direction when they feel lost. Because it's something I wish I had when I was at my lowest points in my journey. So it's been great.
Right, and I definitely need to have him on. It's just the Alex and Alex discussion, so I don't know which Alex they're talking to, right?
I
No,
know. That'd be funny.
that was actually one of the problems in the room because they were like, "Oh, Alex, you're next," and I'm like, "Oh, I was about to talk, and then Alex, the other Alex was talking
Oh
about
man, that's
kids,
that's
and there
actually
was someone
hilarious.
there. I was like, I think he's talking to me, but but yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the beauty about coding, and you could agree or disagree, is where I really feel that people lately there's been this push for like certification, and that's great and
Mhm.
all. But one thing that I found kind of valuable about coding is just really what you know, and it's all online. There's no real secret or some like
Mhm.
paywall behind what you can do to actually learn how to code. Obviously, you have to find the right resources, but at the end of the day, like a certificate or some graduation of completion doesn't really say anything because when you get to that interview, like you said, they're gonna test you. And
Yes.
it's one
Oh
of those
yes.
jobs where it's like you kind of know already if you got the job or not after
Oh
the
yeah.
interview is over. So, I mean, like, how did you what preparation did you do for your first job, your first full-time job to be like, yes, I killed it, and they obviously loved me, and I love them. How long did that take, and what was your preparation like?
Yeah. So the process of actually getting the job was quicker than I thought. For my first job, and it was a contract job, and I think see what it was the recruiter who hired me. Her and I built a very good camaraderie type of relationship, and that's kind of how set the ball rolling. When I got hired, I was over the moon. I was like, okay, I'm gonna spend the next like couple of weeks. I'm gonna just review all the React on Earth. I'm going to prepare myself to be mentally there because this is it, right? And so I think for me, like the preparation just came from me being ready to hit the ground running because I knew the contract was going to move quick, and I wanted to take the time that I was going to have to learn everything that I could. So it
Right,
was
right.
definitely me orienting myself.
And how much easier was it after you got that first job to start to get to find new opportunities?
Oh my gosh, I was getting approached left, right, and center. Like I don't even think it was a month I was at that contract. I was getting contacted by recruiters from all these different companies, and I kept thinking like, oh my goodness, this is just so much. Like it definitely
Right.
got like exponentially easier because I think all it is people noticing you.
Mm.
And once you have that first contract or big company on your LinkedIn, that's when the recruiters really start falling from the sky. They're like, "Oh yes, I want to have a coffee chat with you. I want to talk to you about this opportunity." So it's gotten amazingly easier.
Yeah, and you kind of pretty much nailed it when you said that I couldn't find a job because I didn't have experience. But once you
Yes.
had the experience, all these companies are just contacting you left and right. So I that's something that I definitely try to kind of talk about is always accept that first job. Yeah, maybe the pay might not be great and you
Hmm.
could negotiate and have some of that wiggle room, but at the end of the day, the company is actually taking a chance on you, maybe at like a smaller
Yes.
discounted price, but at least you get to put that on your LinkedIn or your resume, and then you could just kind of figure out what you want to do afterwards. But
I 1000% agree with that.
yeah, for sure. And yeah, that's it's a tough one because I know some people are like, I don't want to move to maybe in your case, I could say I don't want to move to Toronto, or maybe Toronto, you don't want to move to the US. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
barriers that you can make up to not want to become a software developer, which is funny to me. But moving on from a different topic, but I noticed that even in these clubhouse conversations, we talk about like what is blocking us from joining tech. But one thing
Mhm.
I always notice, specifically in tech, is that there's a big push to have more women and diversity in tech. I was just curious what your opinion was on that. And secondly, do you have any ideas on how to bridge that gap? Because obviously that gap does exist.
Yes, absolutely. My opinion is that it's definitely needed, and I feel like with the speed at which tech is constantly moving, it's hard to keep up with the demands, right? Because the whole point of boot camps was to fill a growing need to pump the industry with talent, right? Obviously, the talent is needed. Obviously, the industry is growing beyond anyone's expectations because tech moves faster than we could even fathom. So I think the necessity to have more diversity in the industry is constantly growing along with the need to have talent in the industry, right? So being a woman myself, being a Black woman at that, I see and I feel the need every day because you get used to being the only on your team. And not to kind of talk about it from like a woe is me standpoint, but it's more like you feel it and you're like, this is definitely a huge initiative that when I see organizations taking it on, it makes me happy because I think what's important is getting the access to communities that otherwise wouldn't have it. So now we're starting to see a lot of initiatives that are focused on getting girls into tech oriented fields at a younger age,
Right.
getting them to think more about being entrepreneurs and learning how to code and learning about product and stuff like that and design. So, with those initiatives in mind, my hope is that in the next 10 years or so, we're going to see a lot more, or a lot more women, a lot more diversity in the tech industry because the access has been opened for people to
Right.
be able to see what they can do.
Right, and that's a good point. I mean, if you're not aware of it, you just don't think about it, right? So
Yeah,
you just
exactly.
it's so funny because I mean, you even said in your like kind of when you went to college and you graduated with a French and a language degree, was tech ever in your mind at all, or was it like was it just that Udemy that you saw and you're like,
Yeah,
"Oh, that could be interesting."
not at all. If someone came to me, what, in like 2014 and told me I'd be working as a software developer, I would have laughed in their face. First of all, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was just like, okay, I need to get a degree because my parents want me to. I didn't really know what the point of that was now that I look back. But also, I wasn't sure what my professional life was going to look like even a year from then. So,
Mm,
um, definitely at the time, it wasn't on my mind because I didn't even know about the industry. I didn't know it was something that I could do without having done computer science degree beforehand.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. You just got to figure out how to spread that awareness of yeah, you can be a software developer too. It's not excluded to just computer science degree graduates or excluded to just the top of the top. Like if anything, I've met so many talented people without a computer science degree, and specifically even in my coding bootcamp, the smartest students were ones that had art majors and things like that. I had a mechanical engineering degree, and they're like, "Oh, you must know how to code." I was like, "Oh man, I hated coding back in back in college. I really
Oh
didn't like to
man.
code. Like coding was like the last thing I wanted to do in all of my classes. So it's just yeah. I mean, of course, everyone has a different story and upbringing, but at the same time, if you, I really believe that coding is one of those fields where if you are just consistent and you really, number one, you have to enjoy it first.
Yes.
But if you're
Agreed.
doing it for just like strictly the money or you're doing it
Hmm.
strictly for that kind of aspect, it's you might get miserable. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, absolutely. I actually, interestingly enough, there were a couple people I did boot camp with who were focused on the money.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure where they are now, but I know that it's easy to quit at the first sign of a challenge if money's all you're thinking about, right?
Right.
Like Coding is very challenging. Software development is challenging, as I'm sure you know. If you're not in it with even a lick of inner passion, you're gonna fall off because you have to be consistently working at it, right? And
Right.
money's not gonna, I mean, money can motivate a lot of things, but it can't
Sure.
motivate like the drive to like work at it, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've met a lot. I mean, I'm from New York, and met a lot of finance people that work in finance, and yeah, they get paid a lot, but at the same
Yeah.
time, they're all miserable. So
Yeah.
I see a lot of them just end up quitting and doing something completely different. But
Hmm.
um, specifically with coding, I always feel that it's this challenge that never really ends, and
Yes.
I always wanted to. I try to describe that to people that are trying to get into code as the struggle you're going through is actually the best part about being a coder, because if everyone just knew how to do it, then like you wouldn't be able to get paid as much as you are. You wouldn't be able to
Yes.
feel like you've accomplished as much as you are. So
Hmm.
I I try to like push that point. And but yeah, I love coding obviously, but it's not necessarily for everyone. But if it is for you, I think the money will come. I can guarantee that, is
Hmm.
as long as you have that passion to keep learning in at work and outside of work and things like that. But yeah, and the one thing that I obviously know what you do outside of work is you have a YouTube channel. It's up and
Yes.
coming, and I've seen some of your videos, and I really like it. It's a good mix of tutorials and just showing your face and talking about the software development industry. Honestly, when I saw those videos, it kind of reminded me of my own videos when I first started off. I was like, I'm so nervous. At least for me, I was nervous. You look way more confident than I was when I
Thank you. I am nervous deep down inside, but I appreciate that.
But, yeah, like, how long have you had the YouTube channel for?
Yeah, so this year, let me think back. I think I started it. Yeah, so it's been just over a year. It's been just over a year. I did take quite a break from it last year with COVID and stuff. Like, sometimes the motivation to record and edit can be tiring. But yeah, I started it just with the intention of helping myself learn more. So that's where the tutorial stuff has come from for me. But I know that I really enjoy what I do, and I want to do it in a way where it's not always work for me. So my YouTube channel gives me the opportunity to have fun with it.
Yeah, yeah, and what was the motivation behind it?
Yeah, the motivation for me was I wanted to bring a different perspective. I subscribe to a lot of YouTube channels around software engineering and coding, and I feel like with my personality and my background, it would add a little bit of a different aspect to the whole community around software engineering. And I figured, why not share my experience if someone can benefit from it? So that's kind of what motivated it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very important channel, obviously spreading like, to our original point about spreading awareness. If you
Hmm.
see someone that kind of looks like you, then they're gonna feel like I can do this too. And I think that's really important because yeah, it may sound super obvious, but it really does make a big difference when maybe a kid could go on YouTube and then see your channel and see that you're writing code and you're like being able to change things literally on the browser on the fly and be like, I can do
Yeah.
this too. So I think that's super, super important. In terms of your goals with the channel, I know it's kind of you're slowly
Yeah.
letting grow and sizzle and
Yeah.
things like that. But the reason why I want to ask you about your goals is because in some ways I want to push you. I want to push you and
I appreciate that.
make you make more content. So like, what would be your goals for your channel?
Yeah, so my goals for my channel specifically are bigger project tutorials. I've been doing some research and trying to take time to formulate larger projects for people to follow along with me, and also just talking more about some of the more intricate parts of the tech industry that people don't often talk about. So I actually plan to do a video on diversity in tech and just the unconscious biases that we come across, because it's something I've been very interested in. But just finding the time to deliver that
Yeah.
content, I definitely want to do it at the right time when I'm in that right frame of mind. And I obviously want to grow it. I definitely want my audience to grow, and I want to be able to impact people, and people who are trying to decide if they want to make a career transition into tech. I want them to see someone who has done it and to maybe inspire them to do it as well. Maybe if they're in that place where they're unsure, perhaps help them make a decision.
Right, right. And hopefully this video helps. My channel isn't that big either, but we're all trying to help each other grow. So I
Yes.
definitely growing community. I really appreciate that, and that's kind of how I originally. Everyone starts somewhere, right? And that's kind of how,
Mhm.
if anything, my YouTube channel is a reflection of my own software development journeys. It's definitely tough, but it just takes that consistency. And as long as you're happy doing it, I hope you make more content.
Yes, you too, and I'm wishing you all the best as well, and,
Thank you.
this series actually is great because then,
Yeah.
you're sharing with others and also being able to impact people at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. So Valerie, I like to end our episode with like a closing theme or just kind of
Sure.
this philosophical question, I guess. But it always feels like we always come up with reasons not to finish what we say we will. Is there
Mhm.
any advice you can give for those of us that are struggling with following through and maybe specifically to software development?
Yeah, I would say when you get to a point where you're feeling the burnout or you're like, "Ugh, I can't do this anymore." It's okay to take a few steps back, take a break. I've had moments where I've taken a good week to 2 weeks and I haven't coded a single line just so I can get my mind back into my why, right? And another thing I tell people is remember your why. Go back to your source because you're going to lose sort of your you're going to lose it a little bit because the challenge is always going to kind of weigh down on you and you're going to feel like I don't really remember why I'm doing this. It's so hard. But if you can keep that why in mind, then each time you reach burnout and you take a break, you can still remember the why and be like, okay, you know what? Let me get back into it now. I feel refreshed. I can go back and I can have the energy again to keep going.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And I like to say it's the North Star. Know your North Star, know what you're trying to
Exactly.
do. And
Yeah.
if anything, like your words are just words because you actually lived it. You studied for 2 years trying to figure out what I want to do. You did a 3-month coding boot camp, and you did another 2 years of leveling up yourself, figuring out what
Mhm.
you needed to do to get that job. And to be honest, most of us might quit if they were in your situation because 5 years is a long time to figure things out. But
Yeah.
honestly, kudos to you for being able to persevere through that and knowing your why. It's though just because you could say know your why and actually do it is like two completely different things. But
Exactly.
the fact that you were able to do it, I'm so happy for you. And you've had many different jobs after your first one, and yeah, I can't wait to see what you have in store for us with your YouTube channel and your actual career. Man, I'm so excited for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I really do. I think the beauty of this community is the support that it
Yeah,
garners. So I'm excited for you too. Like this is great. Just getting
thank
out and trying new things and opening up doors.
Yeah, definitely. And so before I close, are there any plugs you want to squeeze? And if anyone wants to reach out to you and send you a message, what would be the best way to contact you?
Absolutely. So, for anyone who is on Clubhouse, I'm typically on Clubhouse in the Cool House. If anyone's interested in knowing more about how they can break into tech from from unconventional backgrounds, you'll typically see me co-moderating that room. I'm also trying to do more around career transitioning on my YouTube channel. So once again, Val's Code Block for anyone who wants to look me up. And you can reach out to me on my Instagram, which is called Coders Corner. And then also on LinkedIn under Valerie Osei. You can find me on LinkedIn. My DMs are always open. I may take a bit of time to reply, but my DMs are always open for anyone who just has some questions or wants to have a coffee chat or anything like that.
Yeah, and we'll definitely add it in the YouTube description as well for
Awesome.
all the socials and everything like that. And everyone, please subscribe to our channel. You can say that you're one of the first like 100 or 200 or 300 people
Yes,
to subscribe. So
almost at
definitely.
100.
Yeah, I mean, I can already tell your channel will grow as long as you keep making content and people
Yes.
people actually enjoy good content. I think you make very good content. So
Thank you.
definitely stay consistent like your coding journey.
Yeah, exactly.
And for those of you that are watching, thank you for listening, and thank you, Valerie, again for dropping by. And we'll see you in the next episode.
It's been an absolute
Bye.
pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.